In April 2018, the man who was the co-founder of my favorite show in the history of entertainment died. His name, Don Bustany. He was 89 years old. In 1970, Don and Casey Kasem started up the syndicated radio show that spotlights the 40 biggest hits in America, American Top 40. Don also worked as the camera coordinator on one of my 2 or 3 favorite TV shows of all time, The Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Casey, this was in the late 60s when we were working together, and he kept saying to me, we gotta do a national countdown show. And we just talked about it. Finally, do the names Ron Jacobs and Tom Rounds ring a bell?
Absolutely, yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. They were some of the co-founders and behind the scenes of the show in its early years, yes.
Yeah, they were running a company called Watermark, and it was funded by one of California's top agricultural growers, Tom Driscoll, of Driscoll Farms up in Salinas. And Driscoll was the funder, and Rounds and Jacobs were the talent, the administrators, the executives. And Jacobs had been a fan of Casey's for many years when he was program director at KHJ, you know, Boss 90 or something like that.
93 KHJ, yeah.
Yeah. And Casey and I prepared a presentation and took it to Jacobs and Rounds and Driscoll. They loved the idea of a national countdown with stories about the artists and the songwriters and the producers. And we set about to make a program of it. 9 months later, which was the 4th of July weekend of 1970, right, is when we shipped the first episode.
There were 7 stations that carried AT40 originally, including KRLA here in Los Angeles. It was on in San Bernardino, San Diego, San Antonio, St. Louis, Boston, among other places. So it got off to 7 stations, and it grew from there. Now, the early years of AT40...
Boy, have you done your homework.
Oh,
good for you.
I know this show. The early years of American Top 40 were kind of rough, and I heard at one time that there was a meeting called by this Tom Driscoll that you'd mentioned, that perhaps the show could have ended very early, around 1972.
Very good, very true. When you say it was pretty rough, you mean we were operating in the red. So more money was going into it than was being generated by the licensing of the program to stations. And we were all working on spec. Nobody was making any money. And that included the 3 principals of Watermark and Casey and I. But I saw a potential in it. Everybody was ready to toss in the towel. I'm not self-aggrandizing here. I'm just repeating the facts. There was no resistance, and I got a bug in my ear, and I thought, well, wait a minute, this is really a special show, and the indicators are the reactions that we got from the few stations and the few listeners that we had at the time. But the intensity of their liking for the show was such that it just sent a message to us as, wait a minute, keep going, guys, keep going. There are, 5,000 stations in the country, and a few hundred of them are going to love carrying American Top 40.
All the while, you mentioned that stations kept picking up the show, even though the show was operating with a loss money-wise early, all the while stations kept picking up the show, like you said, and people liked the show.
You got it. And the other principals were moved by my passion, I guess, and we continued.
And it's become one of the great radio shows ever. Now, describe a typical AT40 taping session. Now, in the early years, you were taping the show in real time. In other words, Casey would be sitting there for 3 or 4 hours with the music playing and everything. So it was done that way. Then later, I know that it was voice tracked, where just Casey's tracks were laid down.
Tracks were laid down with the openings and closings of the music, so that Casey would get the feel of leading into a record,
Right.
and get the feel of coming out of a record. But you're right. Later, his voice track, which was recorded separately from the
Music.
openings and closings of the music.
Aside from the great AT40 weekly shows, you also did many great specials that aired, usually on the 4th of July weekend, other times during the year. Of course, American Top 40's main thrust was the weekly Top 40 shows, but 4 or 5 times a year you'd throw a special in, especially, say, during the first 5 or 6 years of the show, and those were classics.
Always at the end of the year, too.
Yes.
Which was the annual roundup of the year's top 100, usually.
Yes.
Right, yeah, and we did have sporadic specials now and then.
And some of them included things like the 40 top hits of the Beatle years. That was a great show. #1 songs of the past 40 4th of Julys you did in 1976. The 40 most extraordinary British hits of the rock era. The Disappearing Act shows. Now those, you did 2 of them. One in July of 73, the other April of 75.
Yeah.
Was a masterpiece, and I always considered that perhaps American Top 40's greatest piece was the Disappearing Act show, a special you did April 1975 with Joan Weber being #1, Let Me Go Lover. Talk about that
Right.
Disappearing Act special, which really, Casey, I've been reading many times, has said that was his favorite show.
It was delicious for listeners and pop music fans of that period. Now, pop music. Why is there something we call pop music, and why do we go through it and then away from it? Well, pop music, most of it is about romance, love, and about other teenage and 20-year-old issues, emotional issues. And the music explains to us, when we're in our teens and 20s and even 30s, explains to us certain feelings that we don't understand or fully understand. And the music helps us get through it. So those were the appeals. Joan Weber's song was a very emotional appeal in that sense. And my wife was one of the researchers to find some of these things.
I found Joan Weber.
This is Judy Bustany, right?
Judy.
Judy, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember hearing Judy standing here with us right now. Yeah, Joan Weber was a singer from New York, a teenage singer who got lucky. She was on CBS's Studio One. She got lucky one time. She was like 17 years old, pregnant, and this is the great story AT40 told. And then she had her #1 record in 1955, and Let Me Go Lover, dropped completely out of sight. Then she died, unfortunately, in 1981. She was like 45 years old, I think. Sad story. But she was #1 on the second Disappearing Act show. The first one was actually the biggest hit of the rock era by a Disappearing Act, one-hit wonder being Zager and Evans in the year 2525. But I know the effort to find Joan Weber was such a struggle just to find her, and when you did find her, unfortunately, she was not well. And but you didn't want to really report that, but you did play her record, and the story Casey told was really... So, did you ever talk to Joan, Judy?
I did talk to her, and it was one of the only, I think I worked twice for AT40 at that time, and one of them was the Disappearing Acts with Sandy and...
Sandy Sturt Benjamin.
Sandy, yeah, and who was the young man who was there?
Ben Marischal?
Ben Marischal.
Yeah.
But Sandy and I did the hunting. It was probably one of the most exciting experiences. It was a treasure hunt to try to find this woman, mental institutions, wherever
Right.
we went. And it was a real thrill.
You found her in Atlantic City, New Jersey.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a sad story.
Judy became a mystery writer and a television comedy writer.
There you go, terrific.
Right.
Wow, hey, well, it's great to have you along too. One thing I did want to ask, and one of the most common phrases, where did the term "keep your feet in the ground and keep reaching for the stars," where did that come from?
You'll have to ask Casey, and I've asked him. He doesn't remember. He just made it up, and he was saying. I would have to keep telling him, Case, not keep your feet in the ground, keep your feet on the ground.
There you
And
go.
keep reaching for the stars.
There you go. Okay. Now, we talked about this a little while ago. In 1978, a very famous feature was born in this show's history, and that was the long-distance dedication, which became a huge part of the show. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, that was a very, very strong human interest element in the show. When people write a letter asking for a DJ to dedicate a song to a sweetheart for whatever reason, it drags us all in because we all identify either with the man or the woman, the boy or the girl. We're all, we're boys, men are boys the rest of our lives. Women are girls all their lives too. And the dedication had to be honest. We couldn't prove that they were, but they have a ring of truth or not. There were some that were not, and we just disregarded them and discarded them. The dedications were not always on a romantic thing.
The first long-distance dedication song, by the way, was Desiree, done by Neil Diamond in August 1978. Then 6 weeks later, American Top 40 makes another big change. They go from a 3-hour countdown show to a 4-hour countdown show. Talk about that.
Well, that was a simple matter of riding the wave. Records got longer, so it needed more time to play the top 40. And sometimes we'd play an extra to fill in time that wasn't filled. It was just a simple matter of going with what the record industry was doing.
Now, in 1988, Casey Kasem left as host of American Top 40. What happened there?
Well, it's that something didn't happen, really. He and ABC could not come to terms on the contract for Casey's services. It's that simple. So Casey left, and we auditioned a lot of people.
Including me. You brought me in for an audition in March
you.
of 1988, which was I'm so appreciative of to this day. And you were very nice to bring me in to give me a try on that, and I had a great time doing it.
You were there. You were among very good company. Donny Osmond auditioned.
Pat Sajak and
Pat Sajak.
Ronald Reagan's son.
Ronnie Reagan, yeah, and the actor from Canada.
Yeah, that's Alan Thicke.
Alan Thicke, yeah.
Shadow Stevens would eventually become the host of the show for the next 6.5 years. Your thoughts on Shadow?
Shadow was another talent, another self-directed talent, like Casey. Casey was his own producer. Shadow was his own producer. There are other people who simply have sparkling personalities and good voices who don't do anything else except hire out their services. Shadow was cut from Casey's mold in that respect. It took a little while for him to get into the groove, but once he did, he was very good.
What was your all-time favorite American Top 40 moment that you can recall? If you had to pick one AT40 moment, what was your favorite?
Gratifying moments come from when you hear back from the listeners. And our mail was always uplifting for anybody working with the show to read. It was
I used
wonderful.
to send you letters from my hometown of Omaha saying how much I loved the show. I listened to it. I first heard AT40 in 1973 on Coil Radio in Omaha, 1290. They carried it. And I became a regular listener every week, and I haven't missed a show since. The week of February 2nd, 1974, The Way We Were by Barbra Streisand was number one.
Yeah.
You defined me. If I hadn't found you guys, and had I not have really gotten into this show, I don't know where I'd end up, to be honest with you. But no, I mean, it's just been a terrific thing for me, and I've been working in radio. I've done many countdown shows myself on radio stations in the LA area. I've done commercials and voiceovers, and of course one of the great thrills was you bringing me in for an AT40 audition in 1988. I know you brought in a lot of other people, but it was just a great thrill to sit in Casey's chair and read the copy, and just a great, back in March 1988. I'm so happy of that.
Well, you're a very good talker.
Well, I appreciate that. Talk about Casey Kasem, Don, and what he's meant not only to American Top 40 success, but the other things that he has done in his career.
Casey has developed in his lifetime a reputation among people who know him, work with him, worked for him, hired him. Well, I don't know about the people who hired him. He was a tough negotiator. But the people who worked with him and for him recognized that he's what Tom Mix used to call a straight shooter, a very honest man, a very honest man, even sometimes at the risk of embarrassment to all parties. But honesty was one of his main things. And he was ambitious, and he planned carefully. He thought out what he was doing, and he proceeded to achieve his goals. But here's the thing that sets him apart from a lot of successful people in show business. He has never stepped on anybody else's toe in order to raise himself.
Get your opinion, Don, on the following radio and TV personalities. We're going to start off with current AT40 host Ryan Seacrest, the show that you co-founded, American Top 40, now hosted by Ryan Seacrest. What's your thoughts on Ryan?
Well, I have to think about Ryan deductively. He is one of the hottest, on-air television personalities and radio personalities in the business. So he's the champ at the moment.
Plain and simple. How about Rick Dees?
He does a great show, and he auditioned once. He called me and asked us to be one of Casey's guest hosts sometime when Casey was going to take time off. And I didn't think he was right for American Top 40 because Rick is a funny guy, good sense of humor, very creative, has a funny attitude. He's a talent, and he could have made it as a regular TV comic actor, but radio, gets into your veins, and you don't want to leave that medium for another medium.
What exactly was your involvement with this fantastic TV show, The Mary Tyler Moore Show?
My job was that of camera coordinator. That's what it was called then. In film, camera coordinator was the equivalent in live TV of associate director. That position is now called technical coordinator. And the nature of the job was because in film we used 3 cameras shooting simultaneously, and they had to move around the way they do in live, move around and get their shots lined up, and somebody had to, during the rehearsals, had to annotate the movements and the shots and then give the directions to the camera crew. Each camera had 3 people on it. One was the camera operator who aimed the camera. One was the assistant cameraman who focused the lens. And the third was the grip, the dolly grip, who pushed the camera to and fro and back and forth. And I sat in the booth and would say, camera A to number 4 on this cue, go, that kind of thing. And if I kept them from crashing together, it was a successful night.
Oh, yeah, very good. That great cast on Mary Tyler Moore herself, of course, Ed Asner, Betty White, Ted Knight, Gavin MacLeod, Valerie Harper, Cloris Leachman. What was it like working with all that great talent that won so many Emmy Awards amongst them?
I'd have paid MTM Enterprises to let me do the job. It was that much fun with those people. They were excellent. Now, I got to toss a bouquet to Mary, who set the tone. the tone of professionalism. She was the star of the show. She was on the set, the first one every morning. First one there. And when the cast was called for a rehearsal, she was the first one to leave her seat back at the cast table and get on the set. And the others would, dribble on after her. And her mood, her tone toward all the people she was working with was always up and pleasant and supportive and genial. She was marvelous, just marvelous, and a good performer.
Great episodes on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, including the one TV Guide chose as the best TV episode ever in the history of television, any show. This was back in the late 90s. Chuckles the Clown, the Mary Tyler Moore episode, where the clown dies. He was dressed as Peter Peanut, and he went to the parade, and a rogue elephant tried to shell him. that was how he died. And after he died, of course, all the cast members on the show, they were all making fun of Chuckles. Tell us about that great filming of that episode.
Well, look, the reason that so many regard it as the best, funniest episode is that so many viewers could identify with Mary and her attempt and failure to keep from laughing at the funeral.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
Mr.
Fee-Fi-Fo. And what did he say? A little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants, or something like that.
That was it exactly, yeah.
And then the preacher said, "Excuse me, you feel like laughing, don't you? Well, laugh. That's what Chuckles want, And just a classic episode, and then, the way they set it up. I think it aired in October of 1975. And, the Emmys just poured in, and it was just a great episode.
It was.
One great strength of Mary Tyler Moore was always said to be, and you talked about this earlier, and several people have said this. Bob Newhart even said it was perhaps the best written show of all time, the writing of Mary Tyler Moore.
Sensational. Jim Brooks and Alan Burns, plus a number of other writers over the years that they brought in with them. Beautifully written. The characters were multidimensional. And just grew in their roles and added to what was on the paper. Wonderful.
Now, what in your mind, besides the things that we've discussed, made Mary Tyler Moore great? We talked about the writing a moment ago. What other things? The cast obviously made the show great. What else made the show great?
Connection that it makes with viewers. And boy, it connected. A lot of other shows did too. All in the Family, Cheers, Taxi, so many. Another favorite of not only mine, but I think of the world's, is the long-running one, 11 years for Seinfeld.
Right.
It connects with the viewers. How do you do that? You write what you think is going to connect. You cast somebody whom you think can deliver that character, and you have a director who knows how to stay out of the way, and it connects, or it doesn't. I don't know. Maybe there's something else. Well, wait. Let me toss a bouquet to Grant Tinker, who headed MTM Enterprises, and who was married to Mary for a number of years. Here was an executive. Former advertising executive who recognized talent and knew that the way to get the most from the talent is to say, I'm the executive, I hire you, but you're the talent, you come in here and you do the creating. I'm not looking over your shoulder. And that's what happened. Grant Tinker was a guy who did that. He's the guy who hired Alan Burns and Jim Brooks and Jay Sandrich, the director.
You figure it's got to be among the top 4 or 5 shows of all time, would you say?
Oh, yeah.
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 Just seems like that. Talking here with legendary behind-the-scenes man, radio and television, Don Bustany. Now, the last episode of Mary Tyler Moore in 1977 was so emotional, with all of them singing, "It's a long way to Tipperary," and then Mary turning off the light in the MGM, WJM, I should say WJM studio. Your memories of that last, still emotional for me to watch. It really is.
It is. Bob, don't leave out the mass huddle of the cast
Oh, sure.
in the office,
Oh, yeah.
and where they all shuffled.
Of course. Oh, yeah. There was so much.
What a magnificent ending. What else is there to say about it? I'm choking up remembering it.
It's emotional. It aired in March 1977. And that final episode had been promoted and everything, and they all went off and did other projects. And this show still had a lot left in it, and it went out with people wanting more. It went out on top. Why did the Mary Tyler Moore Show end?
Well, I can't speak for Mary and for the producers, for Brooks and Burns, but I think they figured just what you described it as. They were on top. They had done it for 7 years, and that was the time to stop, to leave. And then each one of the cast members had continuing careers in other shows, other productions, and now Sue Ann Nevins, Betty White,
Right. Doing
is
all these
just
commercials, getting tossed in the mud and everything, and
top
for
of the
Snickers
industry,
bars,
yeah.
and she's appearing on every talk show, and yeah, it's and then one thing I did hear Betty White talk about in an interview is that Mary wanted to dance. She was a dancer.
That was her training, yes.
Okay. And she wanted to dance, and it's the show did go on. Of course, Ed Asner went on to, of course, the Lou Grant, which was a top show. Ted Knight went off to projects. Betty White went off to Golden Girls later on, and Gavin MacLeod, The Love Boat, and they all just, and Valerie Harper Rhoda, Cloris Leachman Phyllis. Now, there are other shows that you have worked on too, Don, on TV.
Bob Newhart.
Oh, you did? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I was a camera coordinator on that, and I directed one episode. And I did a lot of pilots. I worked on the Don Rickles series, and there was another couple of series that I worked on. They were short-lived, but I did a lot of pilots. By that time I had the credit of having been on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, so I was asked to do the camera coordinator function on pilots. That's it.